Hello, friends. I am here with Cheeseness. Cheeseness, it's been too long. How have you been?
Yeah, getting by. How are you? It has been a while.
I'm doing outstanding. The Godot Game Jam is in full swing, and I get to interview a friend.
It's exciting. Have you had a chance to keep an eye on many of the bits and pieces that people are working on, or are you sort of saving it up for judging?
So I don't want to be influenced by any of the bits and pieces of mid development. So I'm intentionally not looking at people's projects unless people are asking for questions and getting that sort of thing underway.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
Mhm. But you've been a Godot developer for how long now?
I've been using Godot to make games since I don't know. I guess like the first time I made like yeah, let's say 2017.
2017. Okay, that's a hot minute.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd had a few attempts at making stuff prior to that, but I think 2017 was when I actually like sat down and like prototyped
Committed to
out a
the
proper
engine.
game. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
But I also still make plenty of stuff in other tech as well,
mhm.
even though most of what I make at the moment is made in Godot.
How does it feel to jump around between systems?
Um, I like working on bespoke tech. That's pretty valuable to me as a developer.
Mm-hmm.
I actually find it kind of pleasant and reassuring to come back to come back to a C project or a C++ project or whatever. I do not enjoy Python in general, and so
Mm-hmm.
GDScript kind of rubs me up the wrong way a little bit. So it is
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of a sense of coming home whenever I'm working on projects that aren't Godot, in Godot.
Mm-hmm.
But also like Godot's got like a huge range of tools and features that allow me to do things that otherwise I could sink a hell of a lot of time into. And for prototyping in particular, I find it really handy to just
Mm-hmm.
focus on getting out, blocking out the broad strokes rather than drawing triangles to the screen manually.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And what we're looking at right now is Fossil Sweeper. Why don't you go ahead and plug
Yeah.
that? Tell us a little bit of information about that, and run us through what you've done with it.
All right. What's the best way to describe it? I'll just do the opening I do on all my videos. It's like,
Do
hi,
yeah,
my name is
please.
Cheese, and welcome to
Hi.
another Fossil Sweeper progress update video. If you haven't heard of the game before, you can find an overview here. But the TLDR is, it's like Minesweeper, but you get to dig up fossils, and you can build skeletons out of the stuff you find.
Mm-hmm.
That's the elevator pitch. So
Nice.
we can make a new character. Why not? And this character is going to be called Walter. That sounds good.
Hello,
Let's
Walter.
go. So you start in this kind of like office environment type place.
Mm-hmm.
Where you've got a globe of the world. Eventually, this will have other places, but for now, it's just Australia, since Australia is
Mm-hmm.
where I live.
Yep.
And this was enough. Like, one of my approaches to development is to treat everything as temporary and transient, as an iterative stepping stone towards whatever the final thing is going to be. And so,
Mm-hmm.
for the purposes of getting this aspect of the game up and running, I was like, well, yeah, I only need one continent, and one continent is enough to let me demonstrate that my workflow for doing this thing that I'm about to show off, which is very cool, that one continent was enough
Mm-hmm.
to sort of prove that I could do it and do it well. So
Proof of
let's
concept.
have a look at what we got here. We've got a dig site in Western Australia that's a late Cretaceous formation, early Cretaceous, early Cretaceous, early Cretaceous. All right, so let's say we're going to go over here. And we want to know, what did the world look like in the late Cretaceous? We can grab the time slider here and say, oh, this is the shape of this particular land
Hmm.
mass or this area way back 66 million years ago. And while the game isn't like overtly educational, I feel like this is some fun context that helps give the opportunity for a greater understanding and more prompts to think about things that are relevant to what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Just
pick a
having
dig
that
site.
option there, just having that option there at
Yeah,
all, gives you the
yeah,
player the curiosity, right? People are gonna click the button because, ooh, what's this button do? And then they're gonna learn something. They're gonna be
right.
tricked into learning something.
Exactly, exactly. It's a break point, not a crash, I promise. So yeah, we go to a dig site, and then it's basically Minesweeper-ish, except if you smash a... Well, it's got a couple differences from Minesweeper. So this has the concept of excavating things. So once you've cleared all the tiles around something that you care about,
Hmm.
it is excavated and added into your inventory. So we can see here that we've got one of these now.
Hmm. Some sort
Um,
of vertebrae.
yeah, the other thing the other sort of big difference is that if you make a mistake and you smash something, it's not an immediate game over.
Hmm.
You just don't have access to whatever was on this tile anymore.
You just lose the
Um,
reward.
yeah, and I think that creates an opportunity to have a very different relationship with difficulty from what you would have in a traditional Minesweeper
Hmm.
game. You know, where you might go, well, I've just spent like 45 minutes on this really big and complex puzzle, and
Yep.
now I feel like I've lost everything.
One click and
So people
whoops.
who Yeah, people who are less confident, they're like, oh, I don't want to engage with this big one because I know it's beyond my abilities. In this game at least, may be more likely to sort of go, oh yeah, I can go in and have a bit of a poke around, see how I feel, and if I want to, I can
Hmm.
just leave, and still keep everything that I've already excavated. You can leave a dig site mid dig and then come back later,
Oh, okay.
as well. Excuse me, which is pretty fun. Um, so yeah, if you like get the last fossils you need to finish building a skeleton, then you can just this one's meant to sort of evoke like a little rainforesty thing. Again, everything's sort of temporary and iterative. This is my first pass on this kind of background stuff, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
improve it a bit. But I think that in terms of like just giving an idea of atmosphere, this is pretty cool for two models. There's like
Hmm.
one fern model and one tree model.
Yeah.
The
That.
tree leaves absolutely terrible. Don't. I'm not going to admit to making those. I made them, but let's pretend I didn't.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so you'll sort of go through and like not every tile has an actual like fossil that you can use to build a skeleton in it. Some of them have these sort of misc fossils or
Hmm.
bits of rock that might have miscellaneous fossils in them. Um, and let me think about the best way to show what's going on here. It keeps giving me tiny ones. We've got hardly any fossils.
So as a way of giving the player, yeah, rewards, even if there aren't any large rewards, any if there are large structural rewards that you need.
Yeah. Alright, this maybe will be enough to... What do we got for the Metabarosaurus here?
What about Osiris?
Uh, yeah, it's an Australian dinosaur, an iguanodontid.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, very, very cool. I'm here for iguanodontids. Metabarosaurus is particularly known for having like this large nose
Ah.
formation. Although that's not the not the place that we've ended up with here. Here's a good example of like, yeah, this is like starting to give the idea of a grassland, but then
Hmm.
like what the camera needs to do is be able to look at it from this angle and have it look okay, and it does not. So I still need to do a bit more work on making that behave. But that's it, right? Like you make decisions about how things work and how you want to approach things, and they inform the next step. And
Hmm.
rinse and repeat. You sort of go through and excuse me, go through and just iteratively improve and grow and build on. Oh, right. Sorry, I'm making baby mistakes. So another thing that this has that Minesweeper doesn't really have is there are some limited use abilities that you can use, like little special abilities here, like the Find Fossil one, which will reveal a fossil
Okay.
for us. And we don't necessarily know.
Oh, that is nice. So it gives you a little bit of insurance against being forked too hard.
Yeah, yeah. This is just a temporary one, but I want to make them all kind of situational and stuff. I like the idea of kind of going, okay, well, this will just dig in a line in one direction and stop when reaches a fossil without smashing it or something, or maybe this one will trace the contour of like a space without revealing any actual fossils. So that like maybe you've got like this edge here, it'll kind of follow that around for a certain number of tiles, or maybe it will reveal safely dig the tile that has the largest number of adjacent fossils for you, or maybe it'll like reveal the numbers within a radius temporarily for like a second or something.
Is that like an item that you would be able to acquire in between missions, and then consumable? Or
Yeah.
is that like...
Yeah, so I've also got this research phase. I was gonna hopefully get enough. I just want a hip. Come on. I was hopefully gonna show enough to or play enough to be able to show the assembly phase, and I can talk a little bit about.
So that squiggle at the end,
stuff.
is that... Tell me about that squiggle at the end. What's going on there?
Yeah, so the idea is that you've got the large travel line that gets you to like the central location within a region, and then the local travel line that sort of shows you going out to the sort of potentially remote or rural place that's further beyond that. And it's just like, again, lots of room for cleaning that up and making it look nice. Right now it goes over the water, and that's generally not how travel works. Like that, you don't like go out to sea and then come back.
Surprisingly
So
often.
yeah. So there's like basically some noise there. I think it's just simplex noise, whatever Godot's got built in. And I treat the value of the noise as kind of like a way of informing. We call it a worm, a Perlin worm or a simplex worm. It's sort of like you give it a point, and it says, okay, well, like of the points around me, which one has the lowest value, and I can move to that, and then of those points, which one around me has the next lowest point, and so it can like wend its way in a more organic looking way, organic looking shape. All right, well, the game has seen fit to only give me the silly Tyrannosaurus, so we'll go and we'll build one of them. This is not going to be in the game. This is just me needing to have a small skeleton to do testing with, because like if you've got a big skeleton, it'll zoom out a lot and you'll see this large warehouse environment. But if you've got a small skeleton, it zooms in and it takes place on a table, which is a little bit more
nice.
Interesting and exciting. But let me go back to the default gameplay mode, which is like this. So when you're building a skeleton, all your bits and pieces kind of fall through the air. This is a tiny skeleton, so all these misc fossils are huge by comparison. We can't place that yet. So this plays out with sort of Tetris style controls, where you choose where the bit's going to land. And we have to sort out these miscellaneous bits and pieces from the actual fossils that we care about at the same time. So we've got a couple of jobs that we need to juggle here. I think this is going to go here. There we go. That's nice.
Nice. Okay, and once you get that, you can see the next component that you need.
Yep. We can put this down now, I think. Nice. Another foot. This skeleton was inspired by a like you often see these as sort of like balsa wood things, but I used to collect a dinosaur magazine that came with a like a piece for a glow in the dark one of these with every issue, and it was nice to just make something to celebrate having that as a younger cheese. There we go. And a skull over here, and obviously if you let you drop the piece in the wrong place, it'll smash and then you'll lose it. But yeah, so we got a whole bunch of stuff. But when you build a skeleton, like you're always going to end up with some kind of surplus. You'll see here that we've got like a whole bunch that we had doubles of. So we can actually go over into the research phase. And we can unlock some extra things, and one of those things will be those dig abilities that we were talking about. For now, in this version of the game, I've only got more rooms for your museum and some informational displays for some of the stuff that you've gotten. So we could research a new room for the museum here, but since we just built one of these Tyrannosaurus thingies, we can spend our surplus fossils here to get something of value or interest to us for use elsewhere in the game. Let me just fill this up with whatever. Again, temporary UI. It will not scroll like that in the end. And we'll see that this now has a duration with it. Time only passes when you go and do more dig sites, so that sort of feeds you back into the rest of the game. But I've got a button I can press, so we don't have to do that. And that research is finished now. Eventually there'll be like a pop-up to say, hey, your research is done, and
Yeah,
with the
good
button
old
flash and whatever.
almost like an XCOM style of in-between missions sort of thing. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so then we also have a museum that we can put some stuff into. Let's go into edit mode, and we made this little skeleton, so we may as well put it somewhere nice.
Perfect.
There we go.
Perfection.
Everyone can see our cool exhibit. And then we also have this little display stand or plaque that I can walk up to here and get out of edit mode. And I can read this, and it says, the Tyrannosaurus balsa wooderi can be found across the world, often appearing in bookshelves and toy boxes of young paleontologists. Its lightweight bone structure remains brittle after fossilization, making specimens fragile and primarily suited for looking but not touching study.
Adorable.
Yeah, it's like, I think the descriptions will likely be based on, like in Hive Time I had the Beepedia, and there were the BFACs that were kind of referencing real-world bee knowledge and research papers and stuff, and I think that's what I want these display things to be here in Fossil Sweepers Museum. So we can, actually I haven't offset the camera for the tiny one, but you can, yeah, it's meant to be like a camera where you can kind of zoom in and check it out in a bit more detail. But we also, those things that we were sorting out from the regular fossils earlier, can inspect this one. We can zoom right in and see this is like a piece of amber with a dragonfly in it, which is
nice.
Is fun. And then yeah, we had a whole bunch of other things. They all probably look like garbage at the moment. So if I get like this fish here, oh wow, it's tiny. Let's have a look. How bad is this one? Actually, that's not too bad.
Yeah, that looks great.
That almost looks like it's meant to look like. Normally they're like floating. Well, this one's still floating a bit, like it's not embedded in the thing.
But fish are known to float, so that tracks.
Yeah, that's true. Right, let's get a piece of wood. The wood's usually the one that looks pretty bad. Oh, this one's little as well. We'll get one. We'll get one that looks awful. I like to show off the bits and pieces that really don't quite look 100%, because it's like everything has these qualities, right? Like everything looks like garbage for a while, and it takes some time to land on. There we go. That's a good one. Let's put that one down and we'll go and inspect it. So this is meant to be a piece of petrified wood in a rock, but we can see here that it's like poking out the bottom of the rock. I need to come up with like an intersection shader that oh, sensitivity on that camera is a bit full on. Yeah, I'll come up with some kind of intersection shader that makes it so that it doesn't protrude through the thing. This one's pretty funny as well.
It's important to see things like this, though, right? Because there is nice. It's important to see something like this, though, because it's easy to see either finished games or professional studios devlogs and be like, "Wow, their game is only in partway through development and already looks like that," without really acknowledging the fact that no, this is a very polished devlog that a professional studio put out, so that you get like this is for public consumption. Half of the devlog is actually put it together by the media team, sometimes.
Yeah, and you end up in these situations where you're also, the stuff that you see in marketing materials has come from like a vertical slice of the game and doesn't represent like the state of the entire game.
Exactly.
Either. I have some very cool music in this game that sadly you're not hearing at the moment. But
no, I just have my theme back on loop.
no, it's fine. Another thing I wanted to sort of mention while I was here is that I know that some people don't like this kind of real-time, potentially stressful, Tetris-esque gameplay. And so for people who want something that's a little bit less you know, in that ballpark, there's something like this, which makes it a little bit more like a jigsaw puzzle where you can use a mouse to,
Yeah.
or keyboard to just pick stuff up and move it around. Mostly, I just want to get more of these misc fossils so we can spend them on some research. Where's the leg? There's a leg. And
That's a nice leg.
Hip here. Yeah, yeah. I think maybe half of my pre-release testers are using this particular interface for this game mode, which is, yeah, I guess a sign that
Sign
that
that
it's
people like it.
valuable. Yeah. Alright, so if I go back to research and I research another museum room, I do a whole bunch of UI work as well. There you go. There's a fish that's just poking straight out from the rock.
Nice.
Good times. Oh, that's a good one too. Save that one. We won't spend that one.
No, that's just how fish look. That's normal.
All right. So we've done that. We can research another room, and now we have. Right. Now we have an actual crash, which I'm just gonna go to deal with this crash when cleaning up misc fossils.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I can deal with later. I think if I just unpause, yeah, it'll let me continue. Now I can force time to pass so that we can.
So. So is that a normal? Tell me about your workflow through this. Tell me about your workflow through the creation of this. Because like.
Yeah. So like I said, like my main focus is almost always. Is that gonna let me? No. I think I did break it. My main focus is almost always to get the minimum of stuff up and running that allows me to work on other stuff. So the first thing that I did, and also to reduce my unknowns, right? I front load all my unknowns. The first thing I did when I started work on this version of the game was to get this map going, because the map was like the biggest question mark for me. I wasn't sure if I was going to go with a 3D map or a 2D map. I knew that I wanted to do this time slider thing, and that would provide some constraints for how I approached things. Ideally, what I would have liked to have done was have both a 2D and a 3D map, but I didn't really. After a lot of experimentation, like the thing that I want to do as a developer, as a solo developer, ostensibly solo developer, I have a composer that I'm working with who's been doing the music, so I can't say it's entirely solo. But as sort of the main developer, mostly working in isolation, I can't just rely on other people's insights or perspectives. I need to, and I can't rely on their work progressing things forwards when I'm slowed down on other things. I'm responsible for everything. So yeah, there was a big question mark on the how the map was going to be presented, and I would have loved to have had both 2D and 3D, but one of my primary things I had to make sure that I didn't do was end up with two sets of assets to maintain, right?
Yeah.
The main thing was that as we move back in prehistory, and like this only goes to the late Cretaceous, eventually it'll go like all the way back to the beginning of the Mesozoic.
Nice.
The shape of the world changes, and the places that we normally put seams in maps of the world are places that will be crossed by continents as they move across the globe. So I can't take any of the like usual shortcuts for making maps wrap nicely without seams for granted. And so yeah, that was like a big thing for me, was like I've got to be able to come up with a workflow that will allow me to do seamless tiling or seamless wrapping. If I do it in 2D, like I'm not gonna be content if I have like one continent and half of it is shifted like 3 pixels in the wrong direction or something.
Yeah.
Because the sort of projection hasn't really worked out properly. And so yeah, I eventually sort of went, well, the workflow for using a combination of shape keys and skeletal animation for the globe here, because like shape keys can do the terrain deformation of the sort of contour of the continent, but it can't do like the whole moving along the curve of the sphere, right? Like shape keys just don't work that way.
Okay.
If I did a shape key from here to here, it would pass directly through the curve of the Earth rather than moving around the edge.
Right.
Whereas a rotational, because skeletal animation is sort of primarily rotational, I can have a bone that has its anchor like right in the center of the planet and the continent attached to that, and I can use that to move it around like that. If I wanted to use bones like that to animate the contours of the landmass, I would need like 1,000,000 bones to be able to get any degree of fidelity. So the combination of shape keys and skeletal animation made a lot of sense there. But yeah, so going through and experimenting and working out what that was going to do was like my first protocol. And then after that, getting the dig phase and assembly phases up and running. And once they were at a point where they were functional enough to be playable, I'm going to be honest, I haven't really, from a gameplay perspective, touched either of them significantly in like a year.
Oh, wow.
Because they're sort of, both of those to an extent are solved problems, right? And there's not a lot of things I can learn from messing with that at this point in time. You know? Yeah, I'd already done a little prototype that was just the dig phase and the assembly phase, and the learning that I gained from that allowed me to very early on hone in on the type of experience I wanted to convey. So yeah, and like, also I made this office environment fairly early as well, because I was like, you know, exploring the tone and atmosphere that I want this space to have. Just having a globe floating in a void is less able to communicate that. Whereas I think that this thing with the bookshelves in the background and window with some pot plants here, as you progress through the game, every like I think 13 or 15 dig sites you visit, you get another little plant on your windowsill.
Oh, nice.
Another plant on the windowsill over here, and every time you finish building a skeleton, if that skeleton has a valid dig mesh, which sadly the Tyrannosaurus doesn't, it'll like put a replica skull on your bookshelf in one of the little empty slots. And not that those are like ways that I'm intending to present or track progress, but just a way of kind of keeping things feeling a little bit alive, you know? And then after that, the museum is like, once the assembly phase and the dig phase are in and functional enough to be able to communicate what my intent is there, getting the museum behaving has been like the big thing, and I'm trying to get past this this little bug I introduced. Yeah, it's not going to let me. That's kind of sad. What I can do though is I can go back to the main menu and I can just load up another profile here. Here's one I prepared earlier.
Convenient.
And we can go into this museum, which has a few skeletons in there. That's kind of cool. But we can also click on this little leaflet holder here next to the door. Run! And have a run animation. It just plays a walk animation real fast. So in the research phase, you can get more rooms for your museum, and like here on the map, we can just jump straight somewhere if we want. We could manually walk through all the doors and traverse the museum that way if we wanted. But the fun stuff is that we can say, all right, well, I actually changed my mind about how I want this space laid out. We're gonna do some of this kind of business instead. This feels more in line with the kind of presentation that we want for this museum. This can go down here. This can... Whoop, hey, hello. There we go. Yes, happy. A couple of little bugs. A couple of little UI bugs I need to fix there. So yeah, you've got the ability to grow the museum and expand to sort of match your own expansion as you progress through the game, and like it's a big space. You like my hope is that if you're the kind of person who would sink thousands of hours into playing Minesweeper, then you could build a museum that would reflect that.
An expansive one, yeah.
Yeah, that feels kind of fun. It's also it's kind of temporary, but at the moment I think Light 7 is this one. Yeah, that's Light 7. Yeah, so you can change and control some of the behavior of things and change the general ambient lighting level. Yeah, you want to be all nice and dramatic, you can do that. So if we come back here, you can have something that's a bit more moody. Casting these fun shadows. Very cool. Yeah, I need to lots of things to do more work on, but
Of course, that's the nature of it always,
yeah,
isn't it?
it's so true. But yeah, that's sort of the nuts and bolts of what's going on. That's where I'm at
So,
so far. My current thing that I'm working on is adding more of those miscellaneous fossils as little things.
mhm,
Previously, I just had an ant in amber, and now I'm adding like a few others, and they're all placeholders, but they're allowing me to see and understand that I need to do some more work on how those things are placed within their surrounds. I'm thinking of maybe looking at using an intersection shader so that I can say that if it passes too far beyond the thing that it's in,
mhm,
I'll just like break it off and make it look like the fossil has been eroded
mhm,
past that point. And that's like what you see in real life, and it's kind of interesting if you only get like a piece of a skull and that's the only thing in
mhm.
that fossil, and you're like, okay, well, does this have more value to me or less value to me
Yeah,
than something that contains a whole thing? Like I think that creates more texture to the possibility space that those things represent.
mhm. And it's quite
And then
realistic in
also,
quite realistic in this
yeah,
idea of how much can we extrapolate from what we have found, which may be incomplete. That's a very
yeah,
realistic
yeah,
paleontological problem.
yep. Um, and like obviously it's all kind of cartoony, right? Like it's not
Yeah.
high fidelity in a way that I want people to draw from to sort of imagine some hyper realistic presentation or depiction. The idea is to present some of the concepts of what's relevant to paleontology and give people room to imagine and extrapolate and come up with their own ideas and theories. And like thinking about the whole like time slider thing, if you've got two continents that are separated by a huge distance, like say you've got India up here,
Mhm.
and may or may not know that at one point in time India shot across the Indian Ocean at a phenomenally fast rate. In fact, it's still quite going. I think India is like the Indian plate is the fastest moving um,
Hmm.
plate on the planet at the moment, and it's moving at something crazy like a couple centimeters a year.
Which is significant. Like,
Um, yeah, it's like the continent with the highest population density is shrinking at the fastest rate. It's like, that's that's quite a confronting idea.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, the idea that there are some species that you might find in India
Mm-hmm.
that happen to have commonalities with, like South America or Australia,
Yeah.
back when they were all down in this corner of the planet. Being able to run this time slider back allows you to get some extra context for why you might see similar species.
Yeah.
And then you as a player can kind of imagine, oh yeah, maybe they migrated across this when this land bridge was here or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of fun in my mind. It's also part of my philosophy of how I'm approaching this is that it's not my job to depict what living dinosaurs looked like. Um, that's your
Mm-hmm.
job as a paleontologist to imagine, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I might bend on that a little. Look at my friends eating seeds. These are our modern day dinosaurs. So obviously
Yeah.
birds are a descendant of
Mm-hmm.
theropod dinosaurs, which is very exciting. But yeah, I like. I might bend on that a little bit for some of those, informational displays. If I'm referencing like real world research, it might be fun to use. For anything that's licensed for me to be able to do that, it would be fun to use some of their figures and artwork and stuff in
Mm-hmm.
those kind of contexts. But as far as like the gameplay and your engagement with like the content of the game itself, um, yeah, I'm keen to like leave room for you to imagine things and leave room for
Mm-hmm.
you as a player to infer things.
I think it's funny we were talking before about the shape keys on there. It's like I'm made entirely out of shape keys. That's just how I
Yeah,
exist. but
that's yeah. We have a type of biscuit here called shapes, and I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm shape keyed. I'm totally keyed to shapes.
also,
Um,
what is one thing I wanted to ask you is
yeah.
how has the scope of the project adapted since the beginning? Did you have to deal with
So
scope creep, or did you have other things? Did you feel like you needed to expand outwards?
let's jump back in time a little bit. Let's take a quick
Mm-hmm.
look at that prototype that I mentioned, which I can This one I think is the last build of the prototype. Let's extract that and run that. Got you. All right, yeah, here we go. That doesn't look right. That's missing some stuff. 2021. Oh no. What have I done? There should be a background here. Did I, This is 0025. Oh, right, of course. Okay, so I normally sort everything by date with the newest at the top, and I don't normally use this panel in my file browser very much. I was very confused for a second. All I need to do is look for... Let's try this one. 7th of December 2022. That sounds... No, that's not right. That's not right. 108. Why are these... Okay, let's sort them by name. I need to get there. We're going to go back in time. We're going to take a quick look at the prototype. We don't want bone sweeper testing. We just want regular bone sweeper. Oh, actually, hang on. Is this what I'm looking for? No, that's that old version. We don't care about this one. Go away. Let's try this one. Yeah, past me is not great at remembering to do stuff. Yeah, here we go. All right. So this is what the prototype looked like. And you would select a dig site, and it's got like a bunch of places you could go, and these are like not picking species that existed in those spaces. And in my mind, when I was making the prototype, I was like, yeah, that'd be a good place to have a map. But I don't need the map in there to answer the question of, is Bone Sweeper with some meta progression, like, is that interesting?
Is it fun? Yeah.
There we go. All right.
There we go.
Yeah. The flags here also animate. Oh no, this is an older version. All right, there's a newer version where the flags animate. Yeah, I'm not very. You know what? I'm
No, it's fine.
slightly frustrated at my inability to find the one I'm looking for. I feel like I created a symlink at one point that went to the current version, and this is probably it here. Hey, here we go. Here we go. Let's make that less full screen, because you're going to miss half the action if that's the case. There we go. All right. Yeah. So yeah, I was like, okay, sure. We'll sort of start with a thing that's like a map, and there we go. Cool. We'll do this one nice and fast, and you can see the ones that I've picked up, the fossils that I found are seen down the bottom. I knew that I wanted to present that sort of stuff, but like showing it like this is less interesting or less useful than showing like a matrix of the things that you're looking for and showing what you do and don't have. We've got 76% of a pteranodon that we could build here. And this is what the miscellaneous fossils look like in this prototype version, which in many respects look a lot nicer than what's in the game right now. That one we can't place yet. We can place this though. And we can place this. And there we go. Hooray! We finished building the thing. And instead of a museum, Don is not considered a dinosaur, having branched off from the line that led to Dinosauria at an earlier point. Based on the shape of Pteranodon's wings, it is believed to have flown similarly to an albatross. Pteranodon's prominent crest is believed to have been for display and likely would have looked very impressive at early rock concerts.
True. That's just a fact. That's just a dinosaur fact.
Yeah. We can look at our misc fossils here as well, which is kind of cool. But yeah, so when I made the prototype, I was heavily constraining the scope in. I had an idea of the sorts of things that I would want to... sorts of experiences I would want to give players, but I didn't necessarily want to allow myself to sort of waste time on things that wouldn't answer questions. When it came time to work on the bigger game, Um, sorry, go ahead. Feel free to ask.
So basically, you had an idea of what you wanted it to look like, but you kept the scope small enough just to check and make sure it was fun first. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when it came time for me to I have like a game design document here. This one, Bone Sweeper Concept, which is a nice and lengthy. How long is this? Yeah, 28-page document, which I don't feel like I need to go into a lot of
Mm-hmm.
detail. But this basically defines the scope of what this larger version of the game uh, would end up being, right? Um,
Yeah.
and like the prototype didn't have any avatars or character customization stuff, and so being able to show this is the kind of stuff that I want to get out of that, and also explain like how the gameplay loops are going to work and how
Mm-hmm.
everything's going to be like interrelated and interconnected. Um, like the basic dig loop is just a basic gameplay
Mm-hmm.
loop is just go and dig up stuff, come back to the map, dig up stuff, come back to the map. But then once you've gotten that, then there's an extra layer of
Yes.
progression outside of that,
Mm-hmm.
where you build your skeleton, and then another layer outside of that where you go and you deal with the museum and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of. I don't feel like during development I have um, exceeded the scope of this initial pitch for the
Mm-hmm.
bigger version. I feel like I've managed to keep it all. In fact, there's a bunch of things in here that I decided to move away from after doing some experimentation and exploring. Originally, I had the idea that in the museum phase, you would be able to actually I like this like little concept sketch. It's kind of cute. And before, like right at the start of the development, when I was working on getting a proof of concept for the globe, I also did a little proof of concept for the museum,
Mm-hmm.
um, where I created a 3D scene that is more or less meant to be the same as that sketch. So if I stand here, I think, yeah, it's pretty close, right? With the
Mm-hmm.
pteranodon up here and couple dinosaurs
Yeah.
here and some display cases over here. Yeah, like yeah, having a proof of concept that says, yeah, okay, like this is the kind of interaction I want you to have. I want you to be able to walk around and exist in the same space as your stuff and enjoy being present in the room with them. Obviously, this looks a little bit better than what's in the game at the moment because this was less focused on creating a final implementation and more focused on creating the impression
Mm-hmm.
of the kind of experience I wanted to have. There's a lot
Yeah.
more actual work that needs to go into to creating a system that's flexible enough to do this
To make
level of
this.
presentation for everything, right?
Right.
Um, but yeah, one thing that I had originally planned was that you would be able to. I wanted to have all of the interactions that you did in the museum be like everything that happens is something that the avatar like physically does. So when you place a
Okay.
skeleton, the avatar is holding the skeleton and places it down where it needs to go, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and another part of that was going to be that when you wanted to add another room to your museum, you would just walk up to a wall and push on it, and it would move that wall or a section of that wall outward. Think about how the level editor in Portal 2 works, for example.
Mm.
Except that instead of using the mouse to like click on and select an area and move it around, you would use the avatar, walk your character
Mm-hmm.
up to the wall and physically push it when in an edit mode. And after doing a bunch of experimentation, I was like, yeah, I think it's going to be a better use of my time to just make a dozen rooms or something, and then let the player tackle those together in the map view that I added. And like in terms of me managing my work and making sure I don't get bogged down in trying to create, because like there is the I even have a little video of some of the experiences that I did, some of the experiments that I did, which we can find here. We're looking for I think we're looking for like voxel. I can't spell. No, sure I caught it. Museum voxel test. Yeah, there we go.
Ah.
Let's go and have a quick look at this on the correct monitor, please. Yeah, so I had like an interface set up where I could select select voxels within an environment and push and pull them out to do stuff. And this isn't the video that I was looking for. This is one of these. That's a really early one where I was just pushing a cube around. Dang it. I don't know. Anyway, I had one where it was like creating more spaces rather than just moving existing cubes around. It was filling out the space in the gaps so that you were actually creating an expanding space inside. And I was like, yeah. So I've gotten far enough in this proof of concept to be able to say that I understand the amount of work that would be needed in order to not just implement this in the game, but create a user interface that is fun and interesting and engaging to use. And I was like, yeah, that's gonna be way more work for me than just making a dozen rooms. Let's step back from that and use that to constrain the scope in and keep it from billowing out. But that allocating that time to experimenting and exploring was in my time budget, so I didn't waste that time. I used that time to answer questions, and get rid of uncertainty so that I could move forward with other aspects of the game with more confidence. But you can see here little mock-ups of things that I think I don't know if you see it, but when I look at this, I see what is in the game at the moment. And I know that what is in the game at the moment has like text buttons and stuff, but most of the buttons are not going to have text on them. In the end, I'm going to make like nice icons and make it more icon based than text based for the majority of the game. Partly so that it looks nicer, but also partly so that if I end up localizing the game, it's a lot less stuff to translate.
Yeah, true. How many languages do you expect to put this game out in?
Did I write that in this document? That's a good question.
So you stay really true to your design doc then?
Look, it depends upon the project. In this project, I applied for a grant, and so as part of receiving that, this grant document is the foundation for that agreement, and with those stakeholders present, while I have the authority to change the scope a little bit, I also need to be mindful of making sure that I'm delivering the kind of thing that I said I would deliver. So for this project more than others, I'm tying myself to the original concept.
Okay.
I think, but also this original concept came several months after doing that prototype, so there was a lot of making decisions of what the larger version of the game would look like. So this wasn't just something that I made out of thin air. This document itself took quite some time to write, and
of course,
in writing it, I was building on and iterating on stuff that I had learned while making the prototype. So, but yeah, there's also like, in my mind, this document defines the maximum scope for the project, and as I approach completion, I will invariably find some bits to take out. There is a section of this document titled Scope Expansion, which talks about things that I could add if I have the opportunity to like put more stuff in, but like very few of these will make it in, I don't think. And yeah, it's like some of this may be considered for post-release content rather than than that sort of stuff. And I'm doing my best to try and scroll in a way that means that this whole like what is it called, multiplayer modes is not on screen, because I don't want anybody to have any expectations
fair
on that front. Yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah.
Ripley in chat's asking what grant you got. I see that on screen that says you got a grant from Screen Tasmania, but I'm curious about the...
So Screen Tasmania is an organization that gosh. Screen Tasmania is an organisation that supports the primarily the film industry in my state. Film and
Hmm.
television has been their focus, and they're sort of moving into games a bit.
Okay.
And they have a couple of different grants and initiatives that are looking at trying to support and help grow the local game development community. The grant that I received is what's called a recoupable grant. So they gave me a bunch of
Hmm.
money, and then I will have to pay them back out of the game's revenue,
Yep.
with much more favorable terms than I would get off a bank
Yeah.
or out of a publisher or whatever. So like, technically it's a loan, right?
Hmm.
But it's one with much better terms.
It's a loan
And
with
also
misled tape.
yeah, and also it's like a shared sense of risk, where
Hmm.
if the game doesn't make any revenue, I'm not on the hook for the entire amount.
Yeah,
Um,
which is nice.
yeah. So that does give me a bit of a safety net. But also, like, if I do something bad and end up in breach of my contract, then they can ask for it all back. So
Hmm.
there's, and you'd have that again with a publisher,
Yeah,
or if you had to
and
default on something for a bank, they would
right.
demand that you
That's
pay them back.
that's not unfair. That's not unfair given the nature
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the work. I think it's
yeah. It's
as long as they're not abusing that power, then it's the yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I feel like I need to qualify because there's a lot of people who hear the word grant and their initial expectation is like, here's a bunch of no strings attached money that you don't have to pay back. Um,
That'd be cool.
and yeah, and I mean there are lots of arts grants out there like that where it's
Hmm.
like, yeah, as long as you like give you deliverables, then we're square.
Hmm.
There are arts grants that are invested in just seeing cultural artifacts exist. Whereas this is a little bit more sort of business incubatory in my
Yeah.
mind. Obviously
Progress
that's
focused.
yeah, I guess. But yeah, so that like in terms of understanding what impact that has on the project, and what constraints that puts on me, in terms of having more stakeholders, I can't sort of turn around and go, well, I've got enough money to buy food while I make this game.
Hmm.
Um, and now I don't need to release it commercially. Like that wouldn't fly.
So.
There for when I submitted my grant application, part of it was like, how are we going to recoup those costs? I think they have
Hmm.
options for non-commercial projects, but that's not something that I ended up looking into,
Hmm.
or even discussing with them really
Hmm.
on this one. But yeah.
So, out of the gate, and I think honestly you probably answered this last year, but why did you decide to go with Godot right out of the gate? What was the
Um.
logic there?
Yeah. So I'd previously shipped Hive Time, which we've talked about on
Hmm.
past videos.
Wonderful game.
Yeah, and I'd done that in Godot, and I shipped out another couple of small games in Godot since. Uh, I guess, what is time? I have no idea. Anyway, I shipped some other games in Godot, um, and I felt like for Fossil Sweeper, when I made the prototype, I wasn't really looking for something that I could make into a bigger project, right?
Mm.
Even though at the time it's hard for me to not, right? Like I'm a designer, um, and yeah, when I make stuff, it's hard for me to like. I feel like a designer's job is to curate the near infinite possibility space surrounding any concept, right? Like every
Yeah, yeah.
idea has so much stuff that it could be, so many different
Hmm.
visions or interpretations of the same concept that are all potentially equally valid. And it's sort of my job as a designer to say, okay, well, these are the bits that I think are interesting, and these are the bits that I think would work well together, and these are the bits that would create like an interesting experience for someone else to have while playing the game. So when I was making that prototype, it's hard for me to not think about what does it look like if the scope of this game expanded, and what would it look like if it was bigger. And after I did
Hmm.
the prototype, I was like, yeah, this feels solid enough. You know, I gotta say it was very refreshing to just work on a project without any expectations of what it would be or where it would go.
Hmm.
It's been a long time since I've been able to do that. Um, and it was just like very improvisational and slap happy. um, and yeah, from the prototype perspective, like again, I didn't want to spend my time like writing a renderer. It made sense to use like a general purpose tool if my goal was to just noodle around with the whole implementing a game rather than invest a lot of time in making tech. Godot felt like the right choice
Okay.
to use there. Um, and then when I came to work on the bigger version, I started with a fresh code base, so I didn't really make use of any of the prototype stuff aside from that museum mock-up that we saw, which used the prototype skeletons. Um, yeah, I felt like because this is a fairly tight budget project, and I need to make it fast, then using a general purpose engine felt like it made sense. And of all the general purpose engines out there, Godot annoys me the least. Um,
Well said. Well
which like
said.
doesn't sound very charitable, right? But I don't think in general that it's possible to have a general purpose tool that is tuned to my specific needs, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I would agree.
it's by nature a general purpose tool is designed to be usable for a whole bunch of different contexts and a whole bunch of different workflows, and my contexts and workflows map or intersect with that in some way. It's never going to be tuned perfectly for my needs. And so yeah, there's always going to be some friction points. There's always going to be some things that I look at and go, well, this doesn't make any sense to me. Why would anyone do this? But the reality is that my use case isn't the only use case, and there are plenty of other people who look at the things that I find value in and would say, I don't see any any reason
Yeah.
for this to exist. So yeah, I think it's kind of impossible to have a general purpose tool that doesn't have some friction points or doesn't have some things that feel a little bit irritating and annoying. And like even for bespoke tools that have been made for a purpose, you still get that a lot. I have not worked in a studio environment where people haven't like felt like their tools had rough edges, and like especially internally, like there's no incentive really, or not much incentive to polish internal tools beyond the minimum you need in order to get the job done, right? Because your focus is making games, not making tools. And you know, across multiple projects, yeah, you have the opportunity to polish some things up. But I like pretty much everywhere I've worked, everything I've been involved with has some elements of like you need to have the institutional knowledge of the people who work there in order to understand how to use the internal tools. Like none of it's documented, which is the number one thing that people complain about in general purpose tools is it's not documented. It's like, well, I mean, that's like even any documentation is better than 80% of what's out there being used in production for like really big things anyway. So yeah, I always feel like I need to kind of add the qualifier of like if I'm grumbling about something that Godot does or Unity or Unreal or whatever, you know, then I also need to sort of say that like it's still a damn sight better than anything else that people make as internal tools.
A general tool is always going to lack the specificity and is almost is almost definitionally going to have extra bloat that is not going to be useful to you. And,
exactly.
Yeah, I agree with you
And
wholeheartedly.
there's nothing saying that you can't like find like a positive and healthy and rewarding and fulfilling way to navigate that. You know, and like even though I don't enjoy working in GDScript, I do enjoy working in Godot. And like I don't use the scene tree. I don't use these 2D and 3D editors. I just like they're not useful to me. I instantiate everything via code and I modify everything via code. Like I just don't see any use to this stuff. I don't use the signal thingy here because like I can't search for these signal connections in my code. I want everything in one place. I don't want any magic stuff that's obscured from me. Yeah, if you've got like a whole bunch of different things that are connected to these signals, and you want to say, okay, well, like, show me where all of the objects that are connected to this object's signals are. I don't think there's a nice way to get at that in a searchable fashion. Like, I want to use find in files to find everything. If there's any part of my project that I can't find with find in files, then that's a problem. But I know that for a lot of people, these 2D and 3D editor tools and this signal editor and stuff are like vitally important
Hmm.
aspects of the tools and critical things that play a huge role in making um, in making Godot usable to a great many people.
Yeah, yeah.
That's my long-winded way of repeating what you just said.
I appreciate that. See, I say things and people,
Yeah.
and if you say things, people are going to listen though. So that's important. Thank you. I do think that for
Sometimes.
I do think that for prototyping, which is kind of a core to a game jam, which is of course what we're celebrating.
Mm,
I
yeah.
think that the rapid prototyping style of Godot is very valuable in that sense as well.
Yeah,
Because
definitely, definitely. There are jams where I would consider using something other than Godot, but um,
hmm
for most of the jams that like I've written my own engine for making a particular type of adventure game, and if I was going to make something
ah,
like that, I would just use my existing engine because I've already got that tech there and it's already usable and has editor tools and it's cool.
because why
And
not,
it's
right?
super rough and would probably make people swear at it when they use it, so I need to work on it a bit more.
Well,
But
how's the
yeah, like if I've got
documentation?
I mean, it has more documentation than a lot of other things do, so that's a plus.
Exactly.
um, yeah, so there's cases where I do that, and there's some cases where I just go, oh yeah, I'm just gonna use SDL and just make something using SDL's um,
hmm
APIs rather than something like Godot. But for most jams, um, something for most jams that I would participate in these days, Godot would definitely be the first protocol for sure.
hmm Now, what version of Godot are you using?
I'm currently using 3.5 sorry, 3.4.5 for Fossil Sweeper here.
Okay.
And for most of my Godot projects, there's been a few that I haven't shipped updates for a while, but I generally try and keep the working environment for all of them on the same version,
Yeah, same.
which is why I'm not on 3.5. 3.5 had compatibility issues with the text-to-speech um,
Ah.
thing that I'm using, so I can't really show it here, but both the current version of Fossil Sweeper and the original prototype, which was called Bone Sweeper, have text-to-speech support, so they can be played by blind players,
hmm
which is cool, right? Like that's fun.
Yeah,
Um,
it is.
and yeah, I've written some stuff, done a little presentation on the things that I learned and the approach that I took. But yeah, the plugin that I use had some compatibility issues with 3.5 due to some mistakes, misunderstandings, not the best decisions made by upstream Godot Rust developers, which have since
Mm.
been resolved. And then there was a bit of a lag before the text-to-speech plugin that I used was able to upgrade to that new version of Godot Rust. Well, it took a little
hmm
while for Godot Rust to ship a new version, and then took a little while for. This is how these things work, right?
Right.
And then once we got all that sorted, the automated build deployment stuff that the text-to-speech plugin that I use uses does not generate Linux versions that are compatible with the the version of glibc, which is like a core component of the operating system that is used by Debian Stable, which is a
hmm
fairly significant Linux distro
hmm
that I am not willing to break compatibility with. So until I have
Makes
time
sense.
to get up my own build environment for that, um, I'm just going to stay on 3.4. Alternatively, several hours after 3.5 was released, the Godot engine had merged into the 3.x branch built-in text-to-speech support, and I am open to the idea of moving up to 3.6 when that
Mm.
comes in. Obviously, do some testing, right? Like
Right.
people in the Godot project do try and make it easy for you to move up to new versions. But I think in my mind, the most important thing to consider when you are upgrading to a newer version of a piece of technology is that you are trading known problems for unknown problems.
Well put.
There's always going to be something that you don't know about or someone else doesn't know about. Whether or not that intersects with your specific needs and your use cases is up in the air.
What could possibly
But at
go
least with
wrong?
stuff that yeah, it's like at least with stuff that you're familiar with, you've spent the time navigating and understanding what its constraints are. And yeah, I don't like to upgrade to stuff unless I'm getting some tangible
Mhm.
benefit out of it.
Unless you have a
Um,
specific reason to.
yeah, unless there's something I want out of it, then it's just a waste of my time, right? Like I spend all this time testing to make sure that it's not causing problems, and then what do I get out of it? Nothing.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so I will do testing before I make that commitment. Um, but yeah, I imagine that I will probably move up to Godot 3.6 before this project ships.
Okay. Fair enough.
I feel like there's like a veiled question of uh, how do I feel about Godot 4
I mean, I was kind of
hiding
putting
in
it.
there.
I was kind of like sliding in that direction, but I didn't want to. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying like for this project, but I did want to get your
Yeah,
ideas and thoughts behind it because that's the question on a lot of people's minds, and a lot of people
right,
who are in the
right.
middle of a project probably have that in their mind as well.
Yeah, I had a few people ask me, as far as Fossil Sweeper is concerned, my usual response to that question is that I feel like shipping games and changing engines mid-development are fundamentally at odds,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
Um, and I think
you're
it's
not
really
wrong.
important to sort of take to heart what the Godot developers have been saying, which is that Godot 4 isn't really ready for production yet, right? Like it's not.
Hmm.
It's still fresh, and likely has a bunch of rough edges that if your goal is to ship a project that is stable for users and to use editor tools that are production ready, that now's not the time.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think that's like a really good thing to pay attention to. Obviously, the release needs to happen, right? There's a big chicken
Hmm.
and egg thing, right?
Right.
If a release doesn't happen, then the tools don't get the use they need in order to have be
Their
iterated
fixes.
on and polished it up and have fixes and stuff that would be needed to get it to that point where it would be considered to be production ready. Production
Hmm.
ready. Even for a new Ripley, even for a new project that you're starting today, I would not recommend going with
Really?
Godot 4 because yeah, I mean, there's so much in the way of uncertainties about how long it's going to take to settle. Like everybody says, oh yeah, 4.1 will be fine, but like the honest reality is that again, you're trading known problems for unknown problems. Like
Hmm.
it may take more than one minor version increment for it to settle, and by jumping into Godot 4 right now, you're kind of committing yourself to whatever uncertain timeline that ends up being. And if your focus again is shipping things, then that's
Hmm.
an uncertainty that I think it would make sense to excise
Yeah,
from the situation.
that makes
I know a
sense.
couple people who are prototyping in Godot 4 at the moment, and all of them have mentioned that they've hit editor hurdles or
Ooh.
render bugs or whatever that have made them feel like they're considering moving back to Godot 3. Um, so yeah, like I feel like it's I was talking about how it's normal to be annoyed at at your tools to an extent. I think you also like minimize that as much as you can, right? Don't sort of use things that aren't able to do the stuff that you want to do. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, I also know people who have projects that are nearly complete that they have moved up to Godot 4 because they have a specific set of features that they think that is necessary for their project, um, and that may well be the case. And
Hmm.
those people, I hope, are going to have good experiences. But yeah, I look at that and I'm like, it's a lot
Too much
of
risk.
unstable ground, unsteady ground
Mhm.
to be standing on. Looking forward to seeing how they go over the next few months. And I'm
So your
sure that
take,
their experiences will lead to giving feedback that that Godot the Godot project will benefit
absolutely.
from, right? Yeah.
So basically, your assessment right now is if you're working on a project that's going to be hitting a release, stick with something that you know. But if you want to muck around and play around with the with shiny toys, then Godot for it.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah, yeah.
I think like it's important to consider that investing time in prototyping in Godot 4 right now is
Mm-hmm.
while it's not on the same level as like code contributions, like that's still participating in the ecosystem that builds a better version of Godot, right? Like that's an investment
Absolutely.
in the future doing that. So I definitely wouldn't recommend people steer clear of it
Mm-hmm.
in general. I just think that if you've got a mindset from a project management perspective, if you've got a mindset that's about shipping a game, even if I'm planning to ship in 2 years' time, if I know that the tool that I'm using today is capable of doing that, then it doesn't matter if the Godot project implodes tomorrow. I've got the tool that is capable of doing the things I need to do today. And I
Right.
think that using that as a starting point is one of the best things that you can do for the stability of your project long term.
Mm-hmm.
Because
And
once you've
Godot
got
is.
that as the benchmark of your minimum stability requirement, then you can make
Mm-hmm.
other decisions and you can say, well, okay, how much does this affect our like long term stability at this point? Like, and you go, okay, well, it's going to have this kind of impact, and then you've got something to compare that against, as opposed to just diving in and not really thinking about, what the potential long term implications are.
Mm-hmm. And Godot is heavily
And there are
focused on
plenty of
community.
valid perspectives, right? Like,
Oh yeah, yeah,
I don't want
yeah,
to tell
yeah.
other people how to eat their sausage, you know?
But Godot is heavily focused on community, anyways. So people who are going
Yeah,
into there and with the idea of like, hey, I'm gonna work on this. I'm gonna file some bug reports. I'm gonna play around with it. That is actively participating in Godot in a way that is
yeah.
meaningful, which you don't have in a lot of current engines, right? How many engines can you actually have a meaning, have a real voice in, right? You're not going to.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Todd Howard won't
interesting.
return my
It's
calls.
interesting. um, it is interesting. I feel like in the Unreal community there is room to share code
Mm-hmm.
and have other people be able to benefit from that. And open pull requests and potentially
Mm-hmm.
at some point in the future have those find their way into the engine for everyone to benefit from. But
Maybe.
the structures and processes by which that happen are a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
opaque, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad to
Yeah,
agree.
and I think, and not to say that like participating in and contributing to Godot is frictionless either. Like free software
Mm-hmm.
projects have many free software projects have their own friction points and hurdles and
Different types
stuff.
of limitations.
Yeah, different people with different attitudes and things. I remember there was one time I came across a function, and it was one of those cases where I'm like, I really can't see how this is useful to anyone. Um, like in its current state, I do not understand why this is the way it is. And so because I thought I wanted to use that function, and I did want to use that function, I ended up using that function. But let me see if I can remember what it was. It was projecting a point in 2D space into 3D space, right?
Okay.
So you've got like your mouse cursor moving around your 2D HUD, and you
Mm-hmm.
want to project that. You want to work out what the 3D coordinates of where your mouse is are, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and that sounds important. That sounds useful,
Yeah.
right?
Raycasting,
Um,
effectively, right? Right.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, but like a nice built-in C++ thing where you don't have to set up a node that does raycasting for you, or ask
Exactly.
the physics server
Mm-hmm.
to do the raycast for you.
Mm-hmm.
And this function didn't take a depth, and
Oh.
so it just gave you the 3D coordinates of those 2D coordinates at the camera's near clipping plane.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, what is that useful for? What does that tell? Like, how is that
Huh.
useful? Like, surely you want to be able to specify how deep into the scene you want that position to be.
Seems kind of
And so I
useful.
look back through. Yeah, I cannot think of a use case where I would want the position at the near clipping plane. And like that's the other thing. If you put a 3D object there at that point, you're only going to see half of it because half of it's going to be outside, half of it's going to be too close to be visible.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I looked back through the commit history on that file and found that function hadn't been, or that behavior for that function hadn't been touched since Godot was open sourced. And I was
Oh.
like, okay, well, I guess I got to talk to either Readers or Punto about it. And I tagged them both in IRC, and I said, hi, look, I'm trying to use this function. I've read the documentation. It doesn't work how I am expecting. Is it meant to be like this? I can't really
Why though?
understand why it is. Yeah. And yeah, Readers was like, I know it's meant to do this. You know, it is intentional. And it was clear to me that either I was too long-winded with my explanation or not clear enough in what I was asking for. It was clear to me that he was misinterpreting what I was saying as being about the function that does the inverse, that takes a 3D position and gives you the 2D coordinates for it.
Yeah, sounds
And I'm
lovely.
like, no, it's not that one, it's the other one. And he went, oh. And I was able to open a pull request and get that merged. But I think like that kind of miscommunication could have led to someone feeling like they were ignored, or and I don't want that to reflect poorly on Readers. I know that he was like super busy and at the time was super busy, and but I do feel like it makes sense to sort of highlight that there are still occasions where you're going to have a miscommunication and that's going to create a friction point, or there's going to be someone who's committed to doing something in a particular way that doesn't necessarily map against what your needs for the project might be, and finding ways to negotiate that and navigate that and reconcile that is all a part of the interpersonal stuff that goes into moving a project forward. Like I think that's
Right.
it's important to acknowledge that still happens, rather than the idea that, well, you know, it's an open source project, so everything goes in without any hassles. Like there's always a little bit of work involved in
There's
massaging things.
and there's never any problems ever.
Yeah. And like I say, I 1000% don't want that to reflect poorly on Readers.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it's just to highlight that that yeah, there's still work to be done. It's not that participation that you get to have, like you put the work in to like make a commit or give some feedback or whatever, but like just doing that isn't enough. You still need to also do the interaction with the project itself.
Right.
That is work on top of that. Oh, look, we've got a friend here. I'm going to press a button, and I'm going to hope that I press the right button.
Yo, let's go.
There we go. We have a spotted dove here eating seeds from my bird feeder.
Nice. Love
there are two more spotted doves down fighting below. You might spot. Oh, you can see their wings at the bottom of the screen. And now the question is, oh yeah, that brings us back. I have keyboard shortcuts set up for that I never use. Oh no. Hang on, this is the fun part. So the one on top wants to get down. Ooh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
You gonna do it? Come on.
Nope.
Ah, nope.
Dear. Oh, here we go. Okay. Oop. They're not all friends. Some of them are, yeah, this one's chasing that other one. Anyway. Sorry, I didn't mean to get too distracted by birds.
Oh, no,
but that's
that
what
was
they're
a
there
delight.
for, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. But Ripley, if you're having like good experiences with Godot 4, that's wonderful. I definitely don't want to suggest that you're doing anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has their own path.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
that's important, and another reminder that that's something that general purpose tools allow. That's the thing that you get in exchange for not having things perfectly align with your needs, is that it means that it's more valuable and able to empower more people. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Cast a wider net. There's value in that
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, yeah. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people making a lot of cool stuff. I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the Godot Jam
Oh yeah.
submissions.
Me
I'm
too.
a little bit pressed for time in for the rest of the month, but I'm definitely going to try and drop by at least once or twice for your 24-hour streams if I'm able.
Well, we'll definitely look forward to that. That'll be not this Sunday, but the following Sunday. We
Yeah.
can watch a lizard slowly descend into madness.
Yeah. Oh,
At the end of the last 24-hour stream, I actually ended the stream at 23 hours 59 minutes and 50 seconds.
nice. Nice. You just give yourself
Just
that, give yourself that early 10 seconds.
yeah,
You've earned it.
I mean, it's like just for the memes, just so that people can say it didn't count, uh,
Yeah. So
I'm looking forward to
this
all
is
the
the
judgings.
fourth Godot Jam, right?
It is.
Do you have any reflections on the jam as a whole across these 4 iterations? That like how do you feel about its momentum, its growth? I certainly have been impressed by the stuff that people have been making, and by the quantity of people wanting to make stuff in Godot as part of this jam. Like it's been very impressive to me.
We broke 1,000 entrants, which is very exciting.
Is that the first time?
First time for us.
Yep.
The Godot Wild Jam has broken 1,000 before, but yeah.
Good. Congratulations. It's a significant milestone.
It absolutely is, and it's been a delight. I think for me, some of the highlights really have been how willing people are, how good communication people have. In some game jams, the teams don't really communicate across each other, right? In some game jams, you just have people doing their own project and come what may on the rest of it.
Yeah.
And I've really felt that in the Godot Jam in particular, there is a greater focus on community, which shouldn't be surprising because it's Godot. And like I said before, Godot is, at its very nature, is a well-focused on community. But it's very apparent and appreciated that you'll have people just shouting out, "Hey, can anyone recommend how to do a thing?" Or can anyone, have any thoughts on this? Or hey, how's your project working? The openness of communication is appreciated.
Yeah. It makes me think of the first jam that I participated in ever. Was the very first 7-day first-person challenge. 70 FPS. It's still a jam that I deeply enjoy and love. And at the time when that first one happened, I felt like there was so much more camaraderie between participants, where people were like as interested in being aware of and getting a feel for what other people were working on as they were in actually working on their own thing. And I think that was 2010, maybe 2012. And I feel like in the many years since that, it feels like there's been a progressive decline as people become more and more focused on just doing their own thing, and it is definitely refreshing to see more of that that community side of things happening during the jam itself, where people are helping each other out and people are sharing knowledge and experiences and perspectives.
Yeah,
that's always like really, really cool to see.
Really, I think those leads look fantastic.
They do. I look at them and I'm like, these are like eucalypt leaves, and that's not how eucalypt leaves are like arrayed around a eucalypt tree. Like it feels very, very wrong to me. But if they look okay, then that's good.
It's the difference between realistic and okay. I think they look good, not really tagging them onto any specific actual tree, but just as jungle ambience. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. That was my thought. Was like, I'm not happy with this in general, but it is
Mm-hmm.
enough to communicate the atmosphere and tone that I want to
Yeah.
communicate with this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, this looks rainforesty. Give
Mm-hmm.
this like some slightly different lighting and a different background color, because like I don't have any background stuff at the moment.
Mm-hmm. No skybox.
And yeah, yeah. And then I think this would look pretty good. I did
Mm-hmm.
some concept art to explore some of the things, some of the qualities I want this stuff to have. I can give you a look if you're interested.
Sure. I actually still have a branch from a rainforest.
You have a what, sorry?
A branch from a rainforest.
Oh,
It's
nice, nice.
a walking stick. Mm-hmm.
Whereabouts is that from?
Um, it was somewhere in
If
Mexico.
if you're comfortable, say. I don't want to like force you
Oh, that's
into.
fine. No, I went on it was a family vacation that was down to, I forget where, but it was somewhere in Mexico. And we're just walking through the rainforest. I'm like, oh, hey, that looks like a good walking stick. And I just picked it up and used it as a walking
Yeah.
stick for the rest of the hike.
Nice.
Left the rainforest and like, hey, can I take this with me? And they're like, no, but I'm not going to tell anyone. I'm like, cool, I have a walking stick now.
Thank you, person who looks after the environment. It's tricky, right? Like, it's very nice to have an artifact from an experience, right?
Yeah. Couldn't
Um,
ask for...
but but if you advertise to everyone that they can come and get free walking sticks, then suddenly there's no forest left, you know.
True. And,
So,
but they were okay with it because it was a dead piece of wood that was on the ground. It wasn't like I cut
Yeah.
something for it. It wasn't like there was any actual material damage to the forest.
yeah. But again,
was,
like just thinking in terms of volume, some of that
Mhm.
stuff that falls on the ground ends up playing a role in the biodiversity of
yeah.
the environment as well. And like, yeah, it's like you go to a cave and it's like, yeah, someone can take a little rock and that's fine. But then if everyone wants a rock, then suddenly you've got people like ripping stalactites out of the ground, or stalagmites out of the ground. Sorry.
That's
So,
true. That's true. I'm not advocating this. I'm not.
people
I
aren't
mean,
people aren't good at scaling, right?
true. And honestly, like, this was back in the '90s, so I could just take it on the plane and put it in the section where other people put umbrellas for the flight back.
Nice.
This was before air travel was as regulated as it is today.
Yeah. I remember when like families used to go to the departure lounge and like hug their
Yeah.
hug their family members before they like walked onto the boarding ramp to
Yeah.
get onto a plane, and that doesn't happen anymore.
No, I'll meet you at the gate, right? Yeah, that used to be a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Back in
I
my
used to
day.
remember standing on the tarmac to wave off a plane that someone I knew was on. Like, yeah, it's just not a thing anymore.
Nope, not so much.
Yeah. But here's concept art I was talking about. I've got like a red Australian desert kind of thing with like little bits of grass and a couple of rocks and stuff. I like the idea of each environment having its own restoration in the ground.
Oh, okay.
And maybe like an African savanna here. It's kind of fun. And this was meant to be like a sandy dune desert. This one's like the least interesting out of those. This is meant to be like some Mediterranean scrubland.
Oh, okay, nice.
And yeah, so like all these are sort of exploring what would I need in order to be able to present the idea of these spaces, and what kind of lighting would I want to have, and what kind of assets would I need to do that kind of thing. And so these first ones are probably the least adventurous, and then this one's meant to be like an ocean seaside thing where you're like digging in the rocks on the shore, maybe with some cliffs in the background and stuff. This one's meant to this one I got a bit carried away with. This one's the one that how do you even zoom in Krita? There we go. All right. I'm starting to learn to use Krita, so I'm not not super familiar with its shortcuts. This is the one where I started to like actually render things a lot more than in the others. But this is sort of loosely inspired by like Death Valley in
Okay. Okay.
the US, where a
Mm-hmm.
lot of skeletons have been found, a lot of dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
This was my kind of rainforesty idea. Would like to
Ooh,
get some waterfalls into the background and stuff eventually.
I love waterfalls.
Yeah. And then would like to for the snow biome get some mountains and things going on.
Mm-hmm. Now, are these
Um,
based off of actual striations, or are these based off of just what's going to look best for the player? Both are valid.
yeah, generally just making stuff up and trying to
Fair
see
enough.
what feels best, what reads best, what communicates the idea of the space. Thinking about like where moisture might lie and how that might affect like the darkness of the space. It's all kind of a bit caricatured because you're not
Yeah.
really digging very deep in the game.
No.
But this one in particular was more or less lifted from some of the kind of colors that you will see in opal mines in southern Australia, as we have these red deserts,
Mm-hmm.
and it felt like a nice thing to try and evoke. So yeah, it has been kind of like a little bit of a mixture of both, but I'm being pretty loose with it, you know.
Yeah. Fair enough. And then getting the actual backgrounds to be less of a plane and having a little bit more of a height map to them.
Yeah, so at the moment I've just got some noise that I'm applying as a height map, which you can kind of see in the background.
It's subtle, but it's there.
Yeah, I'm gonna change that eventually. Like it's not final. But you can see like there is variation in the ground striation as well.
Mm-hmm.
Which is cool. Like being able to see like the sediment layers having different levels of thickness.
That's a nice touch.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty important to me early on. I don't know why, but I was like, yeah, I wanna give the sense of like ground that does interesting stuff. Which ones are kind of looking cool at the moment? None of them. None of them are really looking good. The savannah looks okay. Nah, it doesn't. Like, still need to do a lot of work to get this to feel like a savannah.
Mm-hmm. It's well on the
But
way
yeah,
though.
I'll get there. I'll get there.
Mm-hmm. Does it quite look like a savannah now? But does it? Could I look at this and say, oh, this is supposed to be a savannah? The answer to that is yes. And I think that as long as that answer is yes, then I think you're a part of. Yeah, I think if you can read like that, then you're you're a good part of the way there. I think.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I thank you for the vote of confidence. I'm looking forward to making it better, but I do appreciate the sentiment. I'm terrible at talking while playing my game. Like it makes me the worst streamer. Like streaming development, I just like completely not present, entirely dead while I'm while I'm playing the game. But I guess that's a good sign, right?
Mm-hmm. I've had people ask me like, Jade, how do you get better at commentary? How do you get better at streaming? And I'm like,
practice.
Get a degree in fine arts and work a job that has heavy improv focus for 6 years, because that's what I did.
Yeah.
That's not helpful information, but
I remember when I started streaming, I was streaming daily challenges for Crypt of the Necrodancer.
Oh, okay.
And Assault Android Cactus, and I felt like both of those games were a bit of a trial by fire for being able to talk while playing games. And like, yeah, I think I can do okay with the having words come out my mouth while I'm playing. And I've had people comment on how that's pretty impressive, but in general, it's kind of like having those words actually be meaningful is the struggle. I talk a hell of a lot of garbage. Not so much when I'm playing games. Like playing games isn't too bad. But when I'm painting, if I'm ever painting on stream, just absolute nonsense comes out of my face.
Open your mouth, let words fall out.
Yeah. I find when I'm programming, I am able to talk through what my thought processes are and explain where I'm coming
Oh.
from and what my objectives are, and that's really cool. Except it slows me down and means that like it gets in the way of me going
Right.
through those thought processes, which is an interesting thing to try and navigate. I find that writing on stream as well is really hard for the same reasons, where
Mm.
in order to enunciate what it is that I'm doing, I need to take myself out of the writing brain mindset. And
Yeah.
yeah. But it's fun to
I,
struggle with. Like, I think it's good to get that practice in and try and get the thing done, you know?
it is. And also, like, for me at least, streaming encourages me to do um, crazier stuff. Like,
Mm.
if I'm streaming, I want to make catch an audience. I want the audience to pay attention and be excited for what's going on. So I will take bigger risks. I will in my gameplay be like, oh, okay, what if I did this and just do this dumbest thing imaginable be- because it's funny, right? Like, but the thing is, it's not just funny to the audience. It genuinely is funny for me as well, though, and that's important.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like I'm
And it's
going to
cool to
do
share in that as well, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. It's like,
have that shared experience of doing some nonsense.
mm-hmm. You're like, Jade, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know, but I'm having fun.
Were there
Thanks.
I don't think I touched base with you after um your last 24-hour Godot
Mm-hmm.
Jam judging stream. Were there any standout entries that you thought were particularly interesting? Not necessarily whether they were the most polished projects, but projects where you felt like either the developer had attempted something that was particularly noteworthy, or the developer had um, presented some like personal skill growth that was noteworthy.
Short answer, yes. Long answer is it's been a year, and I'd have to go back and pull up specific examples off.
Yeah,
But
yeah. The next question was going to be, have you noticed any of those people participating, and are you looking forward to what they're working on? But if that's not been
yes,
on your mind, then probably yes. Okay, that's
yeah.
awesome.
I do recognize several of the developers that have joined in, and I've been very excited. I am very excited to see what they're working on because a couple names pop up, and it's like, oh boy, this is gonna be fun.
Yeah, yeah, that's rad. I'm also running a couple of jams that are happening in a few weeks, and am definitely excited to see returning people,
Mm-hmm.
particularly like people who were first timers last year, coming back and
Yeah.
talking about what they've learned since the last time. Like that's very encouraging to me. Like in terms of the outcomes for me as a jam organizer,
Mm-hmm.
um, if I'm helping people grow and become more familiar with the craft of making stuff and become more confident in like I hate to use like the words like this, but in terms of producing things,
Mm-hmm.
um, if I'm empowering people, or creating a space that empowers people to do that, then
Empowers people to
that's
create
really rewarding
content.
for me. Yeah. I don't know. It's like I don't necessarily like the commodification of everything and the commodification of content in general.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
treating it as a product is like a little bit gross to my artist brain.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
I just see that as a different way of describing it.
yeah, yeah.
Am I a content creator? Well, yeah, sure, why not? Does that make it any meaningfully different from when I considered myself something else? Not really, but sometimes it helps me recontextualize. Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't see that like there's any big issue with that mindset. If it becomes an issue for you, then yeah, don't use it. But if
Yeah,
you,
yeah. I guess where I come from is like, as an indie developer, there's a lot of pressure, intense pressure, to commodify and monetize everything, right?
mm-hmm,
And partially because like it's really hard to find a sustainable living in this industry, and that
yeah,
in turn creates like the need to go, okay, well, like I'm gonna play a game for fun, but maybe I should stream it so I can try and boost the audience and do all this other stuff. And it's like that
mm-hmm,
detracts from the value that you could get out of just streaming it, just playing it for yourself,
sometimes
Um, and
I
that
definitely
that's
have
that's where
games.
I There are definitely times where streaming a game is more rewarding
Mm.
than just playing it on its own, and more fulfilling than playing it on its own
Yeah.
for sure.
And I definitely have
But I
games that I
think if
set
you're like,
aside that I don't stream. You know, like I have a couple games that it's
yeah,
like I'm not going to
I
stream
think
this
that's
because
really
this is just
healthy.
for me. It is, yeah. Otherwise,
Yeah, yeah,
if all of your time playing games is streamed, then you never break out
yeah,
of that streamer mindset, and yeah, that's
yeah.
when
And
burnout
I think the
happens a lot
same goes
faster.
for like making games. It's important to be able to like make stuff just for the intrinsic
Hmm.
value of making stuff
Yeah,
without fixating on it being like a thing that you can ship and release for other people to play and
exactly. Yeah.
potentially monetize or whatever. That's why I often hesitate to like bring the focus down to product and
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't know. I had I had someone ask me if I was going to be exhibiting my game at a thing, and I was like, no, it's a pandemic, man. And they're like, oh, I'd really love to see your product there, and I'm like, fuck off. This is art.
I still
Call my
remember.
stuff a product. Get in the sea. I was very angry.
I still remember one time I was doing playtesting, but it was public playtesting where in a space for a tabletop game because I used to be tabletop industry,
Mm.
and um I have never felt so slighted as when someone came up and said, "Oh, what are you doing?" I started to give my pitch. I started to give my normal elevator pitch, and they
Mm-hmm.
went, "Oh, so it's like a homebrew thing." And it's just like, ouch. Oh no, it's an actual project that's I'm hoping to publish, but the fact that you see it that way hurt me. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. It's isn't that interesting? Like thinking about like how that maps against terminology that's used in the game industry, and
Hmm.
like it kind of maps against indie, right? But there is an
Not.
inherent expectation that indie games are usually commercialized.
It maps closer to mod, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
guess. I Okay.
Yeah. So
I haven't really
the
thought of homebrew as being like explicitly an adaptation of someone else's work or building on someone else's
mhm.
work.
It usually is. I mean, a lot of
Yeah, but that
surface
makes
homebrew
sense.
is
That
like
makes sense for
when
sure.
yeah.
Mm.
But that was a slap. That was a slap to my face. That was for Electric Chrome too. That game actually never got to market, which is tragic because it had some really good ideas. But well, you need tabletop industry.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, everywhere, any kind of artistic
Hmm.
endeavor, it's always tough to.
Well,
It's always tough. It's along so many axes,
yeah.
right? There's
Hmm.
always different pressures and always different aspects of things that mean that they don't become what you hoped they were going to be, or they don't have the
Hmm.
opportunities you were hoping they were going to have, or they don't
Yeah.
have the reception you were hoping they were going to have. Like,
Or a
I
plague
guess that's one
strikes.
thing that I really like about game jams as well, is that,
Hmm.
at least the way that I approach them, they're usually a space where I just don't care about that stuff and I can
Yeah.
make something
Hmm.
and just
Just
focus on making something.
make something for the joy of making it. No,
Yeah, yeah, not
that was shortly before the pandemic hit. So
yeah.
the tabletop gaming industry got hit hardest of all the gaming industries, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I can imagine that would definitely be the case. Although I feel like there was definitely an upsurge in people doing tabletop gaming podcasts and stuff.
Yeah, podcasts filled the gap for a lot of people when they couldn't go to their local gaming store, but a lot of people set
Yeah.
down their models and didn't pick them back up. A lot of people painted their models, set them down,
Yeah.
then they didn't pick them back
you
up.
need
Never been
to
so
need to
productive in
like
painting in my life.
just paint everything again. Like do that thing like all the old Renaissance masters have like 6 paintings underneath every painting that we know and love. It's like, isn't there like 3 or 4 paintings underneath the Mona Lisa or something?
So, probably. I don't know the details on that, but I'd believe it.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the specifics, but I'm pretty sure there's a few other paintings under there. That's like, yeah, just like paint over it again. You
Mhm.
painted this model once, paint it again. Give it
Yeah.
fresh identity.
There you go. uh,
And it's always interesting. I find that we have this reverence for a lot of these things, but to the people who were making them, they were not as significant. I mean, obviously they were significant enough to not paint over
mhm.
whatever's hiding under it, just for the way that treat a lot of our cultural heritage. We're like, oh, this is this stuff that's hidden is treasure, and like the idea of
Mm-hmm.
painting over it or effectively throwing it away or whatever is like just
Mm-hmm.
unthinkable. Um,
Well,
but
it's
it's so much a reality that like only a small percentage of the stuff that you make is going to be stuff that you're gonna want to keep around.
and let's be honest, a lot of those artists didn't make a lot of we're trying to make ends meet themselves. Several of
Yeah, yeah. Or
those
you think about
fame
Van Gogh, for example.
yeah, several of those famous artists painted over things because they couldn't afford a new canvas, right?
Yeah, yeah. In many cases, for sure.
Which
Um,
definitely changes the perspective on that, right?
I'm not certain that that would be the case with the Mona Lisa,
No, not necessarily in that, and not in all
but
cases, but in like,
yeah,
I think
yeah.
there's,
I feel like Van Gogh is like the poster child for
admittedly,
starving artist. Yeah,
hmm
who yeah, it's like it's sad.
hmm
Um,
I mean that goes straight back into that making content, right? How many great pieces of work now were made to pay a bill by an
yeah,
artist who deserves better in their own time, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's always tricky to unpack. Like I feel
hmm
like it's easy to come away with the message that, oh, people who go through hardship make the best art, and I really
Mm.
struggle to get on board with that. I'm always wary of that conclusion because I don't think it works that way.
No,
There are plenty of artists who had opportunities and support and safety nets, who were able to create compelling and important, culturally important works.
absolutely.
It's kind of like
It's
you hear the talk about. Oh, sorry, go
channeling
ahead.
emotion. I was gonna say it's channeling
Mm.
emotion rather than
Yeah,
channeling
yeah, yeah,
suffering. The emotion doesn't have to
yeah.
be a negative emotion. It doesn't even have to be the same emotion as what you're creating. I mean, Junji
Exactly.
Ito. Junji Ito is a phenomenal horror artist who does things that are just bone chilling to look at. He's a really happy guy who lives a comfortable life and I believe is married and has a kid. Just this really happy and genuinely pleasant person.
Nice.
But they do the kind of art that people would think comes from trauma. It's like, no, I just like drawing this. It's like, okay, cool. And then on the
Yeah.
flip side, you have Hayao Miyazaki, who had dealt with a lot of depression and struggle and pain, and yet his artwork is full of these beautiful landscapes that he wishes he could still experience. Like it's not necessarily channeling the pain into the art. It's channeling emotion into the art, and then and then shaping the art into what it is that you want to create. Doesn't have to come from suffering.
I think there are a lot of examples of Miyazaki's work where he's expressing some things that he has felt trauma about or has
True.
very complex and conflicted attitudes towards.
I absolutely agree with this.
Grave of the Fireflies, Poco Rosso, as two sort of
Phenomenal.
examples of that sort of stuff. Really
But when you
powerful
look at,
works for sure.
absolutely. I just mean in the sense of when you look at a Miyazaki a
Look at a
piece of
still,
artwork.
for example.
When you look at a
Yeah.
still, yeah. It's it doesn't look like it
There's
came
a
from a tortured
celebration in
mind.
that
It
as
looks
well, for sure.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
need to
This
rewatch
is the
Poco
large
Rosso. It's been too
warehouse
long.
environment that I was talking about earlier. Where earlier we saw it up close at a little table in front of one of the shelves, but here we're building a sauropod that's much, much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is temporary. Like it's not finished. You can see the lack of skybox instead of walls where I would like to have walls. But this is enough to communicate the sense of space and the sense of scale that I'd like it to have.
Before we go, I wanted to open up to any questions from viewers. If anyone had any questions, thoughts, comments, we'd love to hear them. Either about the jam in general or specifically towards Cheeseness as he's vibing out.
Yeah, I'm happy to share any perspectives to whatever extent they're valuable.
Mm-hmm.
I just need to qualify that like my priorities, my perspectives, my experiences, and my path is my own, and that it's like when I share information and knowledge that I've found, like It's not necessarily advice, really. It's more like, here's an extra perspective that you can put in your toolbox and use that to, if it's valuable to you, use it to inform your own decisions. But always acknowledging that everybody's own process is going to be different. And I feel like we have a lot of very strong culture here in the game industry of people presenting experiences as advice, and a lot of success narratives that come out of that, and I feel like I have a responsibility to push back against that a tiny bit.
I'm just a weird internet lizard, so probably shouldn't listen to me at all, honestly.
I feel like you've got some very useful and interesting insights. I always
occasionally
enjoy having a chat.
Likewise.
That rewarding.
We definitely should hang out more. We definitely should hang out more often. I'm always a little bit nervous to poke you on account of the time zones. I don't want to, wake you up or interrupt something.
I don't have a mobile phone, and my computer's only on when I'm at my desk, so...
Oh, well, fair enough.
My computer's only on when I'm awake, so there's no risk of waking me up.
Ah, fair enough. I'll hit you more often, because I think you're a cool person.
Well, thank you. I'm usually very interrupt-driven, where I work on a thing until something else interrupts me, and then I work on that thing. And it does make it difficult to remember to be present and interact with other people when I've got a bunch of project work gobbling up my time. Not that I wouldn't be happy to have an interruption. It's just that it's like I have for most of my life struggled with workaholism, and it's difficult to stop. When you're making progress and you're on a roll and in the middle of doing things, then yeah. Yeah, I'm not seeing a lot in the way of questions. No. I think I've probably put everyone to sleep by talking incessantly about...
The Game Jam is technically based in the EU, so, and the end is underway as well. So I think a lot of people are. I think we're mostly background noise, which I'm okay with. Yeah,
that's totally fine. And anybody that I have put to sleep, I hope that you're having wonderful dinosaur dreams. Like that's if that has happened, then no shame or embarrassment on my part. I'm like, yeah, okay, job well done.
Exactly. Now, part of me says like, I wish I had more engagement. I wish we talked more. And but another part of me says, I'm the comforting, relaxing streamer that people, put on for background. I'm okay with this branding. I'm okay with that, with people, seeing it that way. That's something I can be proud of.
You know what? Just to fill in a little bit of time, I can talk about my my progress tracker here.
Ooh, that looks pretty cool.
Which I think is something that's kind of fun.
Yeah, sure. We can end on that.
I wanted to get into a routine where I was doing these like regular progress update blog post type things, and as part of that I wanted to come up with like just some nice visual representation of how I was progressing through the project. And I started to like put together some iconography that felt okay. I think I already had this like little pick icon. But I remember that I started trying to put like the Triceratops skull that's down in the bottom corner there, and found that it was a little bit too busy to be readable if there were too many of those. But yeah, I started to put this together. I'm like, well, it doesn't make sense for me to like draw this up in Inkscape or whatever. It makes more sense for me to be able to generate these graphs from just like numbers. If I bring up my a text editor here, I can show the JSON file that generates this dev progress. There it is. So if I make this bigger, maybe you can see here. So I've got like got this category here that is dig, and then that has a bunch of like subsections which each have a progress value, and then a little bit of information on what the last thing I was working on and what the next thing I was working on is. And so if I expand this, we can see each of those individual categories, and the numeric value that I put in ends up like filling up this multi-level line graph thingy, so that I can say that like it starts at each one of these and fills up to become the next one. And then I get the average of the lowest level of completion, so that this always shows me the I want to see the minimums, right? If I see the maximums, I end up with a false impression of how much progress I've made. Like if I see the minimums, then that does a better job of communicating how much work is there. But yeah, when I was like, oh well, it doesn't make sense for me to just draw one of these up every month or whatever. I'll make something that generates it from those numbers. And the moment that I did that, I was like, well, why don't I just put it in game and let people why don't I just let people see that, and that way people who've got access to early test builds can go, oh, okay, I see that like the audio is temporary and it isn't worth giving feedback on or whatever. And this has been really cool to be able to like communicate where things are, and also for things that aren't in the game yet. Like I haven't done any writing, for example, or the research phase has only just got in. Previously, that wasn't there, but you can kind of get a bit of an idea of what the scope of the project as a whole is from this kind of implying the missing bits, I guess.
I have two thoughts on this. The first is that it's fantastic and I really like it. I like how this can highlight what you've been working on.
Yeah.
My second
and it was only like an afternoon to implement. Like it was super quick and easy. It wasn't a big time investment.
My second thought is game dev looks at text file, says how can I make this fancier?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had like mocked up this kind of thing in Inkscape before I considered driving it from a text file, and at that time I was thinking of going, okay, well I'll write a script that pulls apart the SVG and like expands or injects new values in there based on what's in the text file, which is something that I've done for other projects, not for progress trackers like this, but is a workflow that
it's a great idea. It's just kind of inherently funny, right?
Yeah. And then what I did most recently, because I've had this for a very long time, I realized that soon I'm going to have to start like working on assets for the game, because like right now I've been primarily focusing on functionality rather than content, and that's why there's only Australia, and that's why there's like only 4 dinosaur skeletons, and 2 of them are silly, and all 4 of them are not going to be in the final game. So I also went through and started making a thing where it will look at how much content has been loaded from the game and tell me how much is there versus what my target is, and this is all automatically updated, so I don't need to do any maintenance work on all this stuff.
So we have a question about leaderboards. How do you feel about that?
I don't think leaderboards are interesting. I don't think they're valuable. I don't think they communicate anything useful. Like leaderboards as we know them today, I don't think they communicate or create anything useful or valuable to players. I think they're easy to make and easy to implement without being thoughtful about it. And so that's why they generally exist. People who make them feel like they're doing something that is valued and just kind of go, okay, well, this is a convention. I'm just going to do what everyone else does. The thing about leaderboards is the people that it gives the most value to are the people who need the least encouragement, right?
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, the people who are competing about leaderboards will also be competing on speedrun.net or in the game's official forums or things like that.
Yeah, and like the person who's in first place. So let's say like the top 10 people are the people who then like their ranking means something. They're in the top 10 and they're only like next to, near to, within a similar context to other people who are playing at that particular level. And like conceptually, as a designer, you're like, yeah, that puts people within brackets that are related to their own playing experience and whatever. If we think about global leaderboards, for example, that context means nothing, right? You don't know those people. You don't know who they are. You have no social context for them. And
all you know is that their numbers are scary.
Yeah, like if you're number 1, you don't know who the number 2 person is. You've seen their name around. Maybe in some cases you might end up in, as you were saying, like a speedrunning community where you end up having a little bit more interaction and the opportunity to meet and talk with those people and get some stuff. So like for the top 10, there's potentially like some value there. But if you're like ranked 987th, like you don't know any of those other people around you, and you're not empowered to sort of say, hey, I'm inspired by these people above me, because you don't have context for them as well. You don't. Yeah, it's tricky. And then also when
can
we
be
think about
intimidating.
leaderboards, if we take it out of the context of global leaderboards, we just think about local leaderboards. Um, if you, like one day, statistically, one day you will do your best and you will never do that again.
Hmm.
And does that make you feel good when you see that? You're like, wow, yeah, I remember I had that one lucky day and got a score that was 10 times higher than anything else I've ever gotten, and I'll never
Hmm.
get there again. But it's a nice memory, I guess. Like, that's not interesting, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think that showing your recent trend over your past X many play sessions is
Mm.
valuable and is
That makes
more
sense.
likely to give you context for your own personal growth and your own um, momentum and sort of local time local peaks
Hmm.
are more interesting, I think. So I lean more towards that kind of stuff. I don't see a lot of value in encouraging or facilitating competition. Like gratuitous competition doesn't have any value to me, and I feel like it also drives people away from potentially rewarding experiences and valuable reflections. If somebody's doing something because they feel competitive, I often find that for those people, it seems to overshadow the intrinsic rewards of doing the action. Um,
Hmm.
and I kind of don't want to participate in that.
No, that
So
makes
in
sense.
general, I don't like the idea of best times. Um, but I do have, if I hop back to the main menu here, I do have a practice mode, and my intention is to have something like that kind of um, uh, local, time local, recent history
Hmm.
kind of thing to compare against, um, and
And
put
then
that kind of stuff in.
if people want a global competition, then they can just use a forum.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Like if you say yeah, and like that intrinsically is going to create way more valuable interactions, right?
Hmm.
If you're actually talking to other people versus just looking at a number and not having any direct interaction, then that's like those two things have very different things that you can get out of them. You don't get community from a leaderboard, but you do get community from a forum.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And if you go, hey, I got a bunch of friends. Like the other thing that I am into the idea of is ad hoc leaderboards. So you can say, me and this other friend of mine, we're just gonna see how we're gonna both play the game at the same time for a week, and then see how we do over the course of that week. Um, that's harder to organize and coordinate in a global leaderboard, right? But
Hmm.
if you've got leaderboard infrastructure that allows you to kind of create an ad hoc leaderboard where you specify a duration and potentially whitelist participants or leave it open, like whatever makes sense
Hmm.
for what you're doing, then that creates more spaces where you can get the parts that are rewarding of a leaderboard out of that, and do it in a way that you have social context for the other people that you're playing with.
Right. You can care about
Um,
them.
yeah. So that's the kind of stuff that's on my mind when I think um, about leaderboards and in general, it's steering people away from being competitive. So I
Hmm.
imagine that that's probably not not the kind of answer that Pedro was looking for. But I hope that it's a useful insight into
Yeah.
an alternative approach to that kind of
Hmm.
space
Fair
from
enough.
what we see being dominant at the moment.
I think a lot of it comes down to the nature of the game. Like, if it was a game that was designed from the ground up to be a competitive speed game, then I think there would be a lot more justification for the leaderboard,
Yeah,
which
I
this
think
ain't.
even then it would be more interesting to kind of go, okay, well, like you're just gonna do like a little one v
Hmm.
one and just have it matter during that match, and then no
Yeah.
need to persist that outside of the
Or Or have a leaderboard that only lists people who you're Steam friends with, or whatever equivalent.
Yeah, like that. Then you've got some social context and it starts to mean something. But again, you still end up in the situation where you go, okay, yeah, like Jeff is the best, and no
Yeah,
one's ever going
true.
to come close to him, and that's like, does that empower anyone else? I don't know. I don't know. I was
Mhm.
talking with another developer the other day about asymmetric experiences,
Mhm.
and how we just kind of don't have much in the way of those. There are some out
There's
there,
some.
but not very
Mhm.
many, right?
It depends on
Um,
how asymmetric you get. I mean, the question
if
is
we talk about
is
game development in particular, my example was like, because he was talking about how there's not really what is. I think the context of the discussion were things like nuclear dawn, natural
yeah,
selection, those
right,
sorts
yeah.
of things where one player gets to have a special ability, and everybody else's enjoyment of the game is sort of dependent on that person doing a passable job.
Mhm.
Um, and I used to play a lot of Nuclear Dawn, and back when it was, I used to play it in Wine before the Linux port. So back when it was a little bit more big and more busy than it is these days. But yeah, I used to play a lot, and I found that I would often end up being the person playing commander, and if I was up against another commander who was less skilled than me, I would not play uh, my best because I wanted to create an experience that was more fun and interesting for my teammates and an experience that was more fun and interesting for my opponents for the match. And I think about my experiences when I play Guns of Icarus online as well, which is a cool team-based game.
Mhm.
And in that situation, I also will um, tune the level of performance I give to the people that I'm playing with so that I can play a role in crafting an experience that is enriching and rewarding for everyone. Um, and I was going somewhere with this. I have no idea where it was. But yeah, we don't in games we don't really have a lot of mindshare for this idea of you can have interesting things that don't align at all with fixating on doing your best or the
Yeah.
best,
I think
And I
that.
think that speedrunning is like
Mhm.
another example of that, where people speedrun games that don't have time limits
Mhm.
because they've found something interesting to explore that is outside the boundaries of what the game's rule set normally is,
Mhm.
and that's cool, right?
Yeah. I think that.
But yeah, I don't feel
I.
like we have a lot of games that are focused on facilitating interesting experiences for your other players in the same way that you brought up tabletop gaming before,
Mhm.
that a game master.
Yeah, that's actually what I was trying to bring up here.
Yeah,
Is that
sorry.
is that we don't really have a consistent definition of what it means to have asymmetric gameplay, because the question
Hmm.
is a GM, is that considered asymmetric gameplay? Is because one person is inherently doing something different than the others. But then again, there's asymmetric mindsets. If you're playing a game, such as Valorant or Counter Strike, one team that's planting a bomb is in a different mindset of simply by being on attack than the team that's on defense. Is how at what point do we delineate and call it asymmetric as opposed to simply having different objectives, right? Because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
asymmetry is just a fancy way of saying that two play people have different objectives, which is kind of everything. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I think there's actually a lot of
Obviously,
room
I'm
for
thinking more
growth
about
for
like different, different,
right,
fundamentally different experiences.
wildly different experiences. But I think that there's a
Yeah,
lot of room for growth in between those two extremes. I think that I would love to
definitely.
see
Yeah.
more games that are asymmetric, but not to the point where one person's playing an RTS and one playing a first-person shooter like in Nuclear Dawn.
Yeah.
I think that there is absolutely a space for. I mean, another example that comes into my mind a lot, because especially with one of the projects I'm working on now, is MMOs.
Hmm.
There is asymmetric gameplay in MMOs. People don't think of it as such and they don't call it as such, but the player that derives the most enjoyment from sitting in town focusing on crafting and talking to people is playing a different game than the person who's going into deep dungeons. And that person who's doing the dungeon dives is
Yeah.
playing a
Yeah.
different game than the person who's diving deep into the lore and reading every item description and trying to figure out the secrets that of the land. Just look at Bartle's taxonomy, right? Like those are four different to the point of being asymmetric in players' mindsets. So
yeah.
anyway, that's what's going on in my brain.
Really fun experiences with a game called Codename Eagle, which was the game that people who went on to make Battlefield made before they made Battlefield, and it was set in an alternate history World War One, where Russia had kind of exploded and taken over the rest of the world, kind of thing, and it was like the Allied resistance against that massive force, and it has like Zeppelins and other cool, like, not modern things, and its damage model is closer to Quake than Counter-Strike, so you can eat a rocket to the face and still hop in a biplane and fly away. But that was like the first game that I played that was like a multiplayer game where you had first-person shooter-type gameplay, but you also had vehicles and stuff, and I found at the LANs that I used to host that people who would typically only play like the flight sims or space combat sims or whatever could get into it, and people who were into like racing sims and stuff could get into it, and then people who would play first-person games could also get into it, and it was able to bring together excuse me, a lot of people who normally wouldn't play the same games. And that's another kind of example of how that offering a spectrum of experiences can create something that just otherwise, doesn't exist. Like, nothing brings people together like that kind of thing in that way.
So yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah. But I do like the idea of, like, as a player, and maybe this is because I'm a designer and this is a mindset that I already have, but I like the idea of playing a part in creating an interesting experience for the people I'm playing with. I mean, I think like this extends way outside of just games. Like, I can think of, I used to play tennis, and like I would often adjust how I played in order to be able to have a fun match with someone who wasn't at my skill. Not that I'm particularly skilled, but I sometimes end up matched up against someone who was below my level, and I'm like,
let's make it as interesting
it's more
as possible.
fun to have. Yeah, it's more fun to have something interesting than for me to just trounce them,
Absolutely. For me, that usually took the place of dark horse style lists / equipment builds / setups, where I'm playing outside the meta, therefore giving myself a deeper challenge because I'm not playing the quote unquote good things, but sometimes that comes to your advantage against the higher skilled players who don't know how to deal with your build, and it sort of levels the playing field of your opponents. But there was one person who I used to play tabletop games with, who was one of the best players in the country.
Right.
And he couldn't turn it off.
What does that mean in terms of? I guess there's lots of different types of tabletop games. Was this like a competitive thing that they were the best at? Yeah.
Okay. It was a War Machine, the tabletop game.
Right.
You've heard of it.
Gotcha. It's like, and my immediate first thought was more like Dungeons and Dragons-ish, and I'm like, oh, that's like a collaborative storytelling space.
No, this was a tabletop war game.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And he couldn't turn it off. He was incredibly skilled at the game and literally incapable of playing a casual game with a new player, because once he sat down at the table, he was in tournament mindset.
In that mode, yeah. I think that's what I'm getting at when I'm sort of saying that, like, being hyper competitive can take you away from some of the more intrinsically enjoyable elements of doing a thing. Although I guess
I think that's
maybe it's not intrinsic. I don't know, but
I was going to say I think that's a bit of a tainted view, simply because this person enjoyed it. Like, this person lived for that competitive mindset and enjoyed solving the puzzle of how to best win the game. So they had fun, right? He's not having fun wrong. He's only having fun wrong if he's being paired up against somebody who's not even in his same weight class, and then him not being able to turn it off does change it. But his mindset of optimization forces him into a certain playstyle, which is interesting.
And stops. It would stop them from experiencing things outside of that optimal experience as well, which I guess was sort of more what I was getting at, is that there's like
Yeah.
the possibility space of valid experiences that you can have extends in places that competitive focus doesn't take you.
True. It just sounded like it runs the risk of telling someone they're playing the game wrong, right? Because
Yeah,
you
that's
did love
not,
the game.
yeah, it's not really what I was thinking about, but yeah, I don't want to be dismissive of people having that kind of thing. But I also I think about my experiences of playing like StarCraft, and I don't play StarCraft online because nobody wants to play a match. Everyone plays like 30 seconds and then quits because they didn't get the opening that they wanted to have or whatever. And I'm like, but like, there's so much more to the game than just that opening, that perfect opening. If you're not fixated on winning, there's a whole lot of enjoyment you could have in the meantime, right?
Yeah.
And my feeling is that like, it's rude. It's rude to bail on a match early, but I know other people who play with that kind of mindset, and they're like, no, it's rude for me to keep playing if I'm just wasting your time and you don't get like a challenging match out of it. It's an interesting mindset.
And yeah, in that particular tabletop game, I would play. I found a fun niche where I played what was considered the worst leader. The leader just was very important to the army composition. I played the worst leader in the entire game, but I learned it so well that I got people in my local meta fearing them. It's like, oh no, they're scary. And then when someone was from out of town was there, like, really? No, they're terrible. But because I had a higher skill level than many of the locals, and that was my way of playing down, I didn't have to hold back. I could give them a good battle without having to hold back my skill, because I was putting myself on a lower potential level, right? I was putting myself on in a situation where I had an uphill climb to win, inherently, just because of my army selection.
Yeah, and that's cool when you can have the flexibility to like. Yeah. Maybe handicap isn't the right word, but like have things that can offset and reframe the experience to.
I think handicap is exactly. I think handicap is exactly the right word.
Maybe
because I'm not holding back my skill level, as like you were saying with tennis and whatnot. I'm not holding back. I'm still playing to the best of my ability, but I'm playing to the best of my ability with a more difficult uphill battle. It's just different mindsets.
Yeah. I as a designer, I feel like there's something like very rewarding about crafting an experience that someone else can get something out of. And that's the feeling that I get when I'm playing Guns of Icarus, and I'm like, not necessarily doing my best. I'm like picking the right time to do a thing that will make it more engaging for everyone. That's it's fun in its own way.
And if you're streaming, then you just do whatever's funniest.
Yeah.
I
there are some times where I'm like, okay, we're playing the map that I really like, and we're going to be playing the gameplay that I really like, so I'm going to apologize ahead of time to the opponent team, and we're just going to absolutely ravage.
We're just going to clown on you.
Absolutely ravage everyone. There's I don't know if you've ever played that game, but it's kind of like a team-based submarine combat game where you have multiple submarines that are fighting each other. You don't attack individual people on the enemy team, you only attack ships, and so the game doesn't reward individual people, it only rewards teams, and like there's no focus on an individual play, which makes it a very different kind of thing to a lot of other team-based games. It's first person, so you walk around your it's like kind of like submarine combat, but it's steampunk airship themed. And so you walk around your airship and you can hop on the helm, or you can hop on some weapons, or you can go and like repair some systems or whatever. It's very, very cool. And there's one level called Canyon Ambush, which has like this very maze-like space in the middle of a long map that's full of all this dense cloud that you can't see through. And I always take a kind of glass cannon ship called the Hobbled Donkey. You get to name your own ships if you're the pilot. I'm like, hell yeah, we can take the Hobbled Donkey out. And it's like, it's got this massive, like, giant basically like a rocket launcher, but it's a shotgun and shoots
Mm-hmm.
lots of little rockets.
Sounds
And yeah, we
fantastic.
just like get into the cloud bank, hide behind a pillar, and
Mm-hmm.
just play cat and mouse with the enemy team. I love that. Like yeah, sometimes there are times where I have to go. Yeah, I'm sorry to the enemy team and sorry to my allies because we're probably not going to give them as much enjoyment as they get if we were focusing on crafting a rewarding experience for everyone. But yeah, I'm just gonna take my team in and my crew in, and we're gonna we're gonna blast everyone out of the sky.
But that's like
It's a lot of fun
that's an
sometimes.
that's an age-old debate in game development, though, eh? It's what happens if you cost somebody their enjoyment and somebody else gets more enjoyment, right? At what point does
Mm,
at what point does somebody else's lack of enjoyment due to failure conflict with somebody
yeah,
else's enjoyment due to success? Like that's a very common
and I
multiplayer
think we
game.
like broadly
Discuss.
accept that, say, Monopoly, for example, is a badly Monopoly as we
Yeah.
know it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Monopoly has a
Mm-hmm.
fun and interesting and storied history, and I would like everybody to read up and become aware that the game that is like sold as this kind of like pinnacle archetypal board game sold by the
Is
Parker brothers
is
actually
bad
has
actually.
well, it was designed by a woman and it was a totally different game.
Mm-hmm.
Monopoly is only the first half of the game. The second half of the game is all about giving you the perspective to see why the first half of the game is bad. It's a
Mm-hmm.
lesson in how the economics of landlordship are not really in anybody's best interests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she ended up selling the rights to it to the Parker brothers, and her name and involvement and intent for the project has more or less been erased from the public consciousness. So I encourage
Yeah.
everybody to read in about that. But the point I was
Mm-hmm.
making was that when you play Monopoly, it's very clear at a point when one person has started to become dominant and nobody else
Mm-hmm.
will be able to
Progress.
catch up. And for them, the game is not enjoyable. For the majority of people playing, the game is not enjoyable.
Right.
Um, yeah. But when I do
Mm-hmm.
Canyon Ambush, I take that glass cannon so that there's the risk
Fair.
that some other ship can take me out of the sky, and it's always exciting and fun when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Although
So we've been
sometimes I take
going.
a different ship in, and we don't push quite so hard.
Mm-hmm. So we're at around about the 2.5 hour mark. It's I was
Yeah.
time flies, eh?
Yeah, I apologies for talking too long. I feel
Oh
like
no, no, no,
I'm
no. This is
very good
fine.
at going over time. I have no idea how much time we had allocated. That was something that I intended to ask you right at the beginning and then completely
It's
forgot.
it's pretty flexible. I usually go around 2 hours and sometimes go stretch it to 4. It's pretty flexible, but I was yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought
Mm-hmm.
for some reason I was thinking 2 hours ish, so
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
we went a little bit over that expectation. But I hope it's been interesting and enjoyable. I
It's
guess.
been a delight. It's been an absolute delight.
Um, yeah, really looking forward to seeing people's Godot Jam submissions,
Mm-hmm.
and looking forward to seeing the jam continue to grow and iterate over the coming years, assuming that it's going to continue. I mean, I assume it
Absolutely.
feels like a foregone conclusion, but it's also probably not like a good thing to assume, right? Like
To
people need to be able to move on and do their own thing. If
as
someone
an as an
says
event
I'm done organizing,
organizer, it's going to continue on to the best of my knowledge.
sweet, sweet. Yeah, there's been a few things that I've done over my life where I'm like, yeah, this has been like a fun thing to do, and like it's been 4 years, 5 years, whatever, and it's
Mm-hmm.
time for me to do something else. And like, if there are other people around and it makes sense to have some level of continuity there, then yeah, I'll hand the reins over. But there are some times where it's like it's okay for a thing to end. It's fine, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives room for new things to show up,
Right.
and yeah, I think it's healthy to allow things to
Mm-hmm.
conclude. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah,
But not yet.
but no, it's great that there are plans to continue it onward. I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking forward to that.
Yeah. I will get in touch with you later. Hopefully, I'll see you again on some of the judging streams. And
Yeah,
it's been a delight as always. Anything you'd like to say in closing?
yeah. Um, be nice to bees. It's World
Be
Bee
nice to
Day on May
bees.
the 20th. Be nice to bees. Thank you. It's been an enormous pleasure as always to catch up.
Mine as well. Tomorrow there'll be the D&D game as scheduled, but on the Saturday after that, we have Magus Serling, the sound designer for Lackadaisy Cats, as well as several other projects, including Satina, Hell of a Boss. Wonderful person. They'll be here on Saturday for an interview, and then pretty much after that, for all of next week, we have Game Jam judging, culminating in me doing a 24-hour stream in which I slowly descend into madness. So, look forward to that. Thank you all. Be sure to like the video, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Cheers, friends.